The scent of freshly bloomed petunias usually brought a smile to Evelyn Reed's face. At 64, her garden in Fairview, Iowa was her sanctuary, a vibrant testament to years of careful nurturing. But that Tuesday morning in October, a different kind of scent hung in the air, the acrid tang of unease. The familiar rumble of her son, David's SUV pulling into her driveway, was punctuated by the unusually sharp slam of car doors. A shiver, unrelated to the crisp autumn air, traced its way down her spine. Stepping around her modest two-story home, Evelyn found David on the porch, his wife Sophia beside him. This wasn't a casual visit. 2 large suitcases sat next to Sophia, while David wrestled more bags from the trunk. "Mom," David's voice was strained. "We need to talk." Evelyn wiped her hands on her gardening apron, her gaze sharp. David, usually so meticulous, looked disheveled, his tie askew, dark circles under his eyes. Sophia, by contrast, was impeccably composed in a designer outfit, her blonde hair perfect. "What's going on?" Evelyn asked, unlocking the front door. "Is everything all right?" Inside, their footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. Evelyn noticed Sophia's keen eyes sweeping her living room, assessing furniture and decorations with an almost calculating air. "Mom, we have something to tell you," David began, sinking heavily into the old recliner, his late father's favorite. Evelyn poured herself coffee, her hands steady despite the growing knot in her stomach. "I'm listening." David glanced at Sophia, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "We sold the house." The words hung heavy. Evelyn carefully set her coffee cup down. "Which house?" she asked, though a cold dread already answered. "Our house," he clarified. "The one on Elm Street." Elm Street. The beautiful colonial she'd helped them buy, contributing $40,000 from her retirement savings for the down payment. The house where she'd spent countless weekends painting and planting, efforts Sophia had never truly appreciated. "You sold it?" Her voice was a bare whisper. "Why didn't you tell me?" Sophia finally spoke, her tone cool and dismissive. "We didn't need permission, Evelyn. It's our house." "I understand it's your house," Evelyn countered, "but we discussed your long-term plans. You said it was perfect for raising children." David shifted uncomfortably. "Plans change, Mom." "How much did you get for it?" Evelyn asked. $620,000, Sophia interjected, a hint of triumph in her voice. Evelyn's breath hitched. $620,000. More than she'd earned in a decade before retiring. "That's wonderful," she managed. "So, where are you moving? A bigger place? Better school district?" The ensuing silence was deafening. David stared at his hands. Sophia examined her manicured nails. "Actually, Mom," David finally said, "we were hoping we could stay here with you, just temporarily." "Stay here?" Evelyn blinked, sure she'd misheard. "It would just be for a little while," he rushed to explain. "Maybe a few months, we wouldn't be any trouble." "But what happened to the money from the sale?" Another heavier silence. "Well," Sophia said, smoothing her skirt, "I had some expenses, things I needed to take care of." "What kind of expenses?" Evelyn pressed. "Personal things," Sophia replied, her tone ending the conversation. But Evelyn wasn't finished. "Sophia, you just sold a house for over $600,000. What could possibly—" "I bought some jewelry," she interrupted, "and some clothes. My car was detailed and upgraded. I took a spa trip to Palm Springs, California with my sister. Oh, and I paid off my credit cards." Evelyn waited for her to continue, to explain where the rest had gone. When she didn't, a cold dread settled in Evelyn's chest. "How much jewelry?" she asked, quietly. "Does it matter?" Sophia snapped. "It was my money to spend." "Your money?" The words escaped before Evelyn could stop them. David finally looked up. "Mom, please. We just need a place to stay." "Get back on your feet?" Evelyn repeated. "David, you just had over $500,000. How are you not on your feet?" "It's complicated," he mumbled. Evelyn looked between her son and his wife, truly seeing them for the first time. David, the responsible boy she'd raised, now homeless despite a fortune. And Sophia, who had never worked, sat in a brand new outfit that likely cost more than Evelyn's monthly social security. "Where did all the money go, Sophia?" Evelyn asked, her voice firmer. Sophia rolled her eyes. "I told you I had expenses. $620,000 worth of expenses. It's not your business, Evelyn." Something snapped inside Evelyn. "It became my business when you showed up at my door asking for a place to live." David buried his face in his hands. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder than it has to be?" Evelyn stood, her coffee forgotten. "David, help me understand. You had a beautiful house, money in the bank, and now you're asking to move in with your 64-year-old mother because your wife spent it all on jewelry and spa trips?" "It wasn't just jewelry and spa trips," Sophia said defensively. "I had debts to pay off." "What debts?" "Credit card debts." "How much?" Sophia glared. "Enough." Evelyn felt like she was drowning. David finally raised his head, and Evelyn saw something that broke her heart. Defeat, embarrassment, but also resignation. "How much debt did she have?" Evelyn asked him directly. David sighed deeply. "About $80,000, on credit cards." Evelyn felt dizzy. What did she buy with $80,000 on credit cards? "Clothes mostly," he said quietly. "Shoes, handbags, vacations before we were married." "And the rest of the money from the house?" David looked at Sophia, who was now engrossed in her phone. "She wanted to redecorate her sister's house as a surprise," he said. "And she bought a new car for her mother. And she wanted to invest in her friend's business." "What kind of business?" "A boutique," Sophia said without looking up. "It's going to be very successful." "How much did you invest?" $300,000. The number hit Evelyn like a physical blow. $300,000 in a friend's boutique, invested by a woman who'd never run a business, never held a job, never shown interest in anything beyond shopping and spa treatments. "So let me get this straight," Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper. "You sold your house for $620,000. $80,000 went to pay off Sophia's credit card debts. $300,000 went to invest in her friend's boutique. What happened to the rest?" "I told you," Sophia said, looking up with irritation. "I had expenses. The jewelry, the spa trips, the car detailing, some furniture for the boutique, gifts for my family. Things add up." Evelyn quickly calculated. Even with generous allowances, at least $50,000 should be left. "Where's the rest of the money?" she asked. "There is no rest," Sophia said. "It's gone. Gone. Over $600,000 gone in months on luxuries and a boutique investment that Evelyn was sure would never see a profit." Evelyn sank back into her chair, feeling every one of her 64 years. This wasn't just about money. It was about the son she'd raised, the values she'd instilled, and the woman who had convinced him to throw it all away. "So now you want to live here," she said. "Just temporarily," David repeated. Evelyn looked around her small home. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a tiny kitchen. She'd worked 30 years to pay off this house, to live out her retirement in peace. "And what's your plan?" she asked. "How do you intend to get back on your feet?" David and Sophia exchanged a look. "Well," Sophia said, "David will keep working, obviously, and I'm sure the boutique will start turning a profit. Just soon," she shrugged. "And if it doesn't, then we'll figure something else out." Evelyn stared at this woman who, having convinced her son to squander a fortune, now sat in Evelyn's living room with the casual confidence of someone expecting to be taken care of. "No," Evelyn said quietly. "What?" David looked up sharply. "I said no. You can't stay here." The temperature in the room plummeted. The word no hung in the air like a challenge. Evelyn watched David's face crumble, but it was Sophia's reaction that unsettled her. Her composed mask slipped, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "Mom, you can't be serious." David's voice rose. "We're family." "Yes, we are family," Evelyn replied, her voice steadier than she felt. which is why I'm not going to enable this disaster you've created. Sophia set her phone down with deliberate force. Enable what? Disaster, Evelyn. My husband made a business decision. Not every investment pays off immediately. Business decision? Evelyn couldn't keep the incredulity out of her voice. Spending $600,000 on jewelry, spa trips, and your friend's boutique is not a business decision, Sophia. It's reckless spending. How dare you judge how I spend my money? She snapped, her composure finally cracking. It wasn't your money, Evelyn said quietly. It was the equity in a house that my son worked for, that I helped purchase. David stood abruptly, pacing to the front window. Mom, we wouldn't ask if we had anywhere else to go. What about Sophia's family? Surely her parents live in a one-bedroom condo, David said. And her sister doesn't have room. The sister whose house Sophia had spent thousands redecorating as a surprise. Sophia's eyes flashed with anger. My personal relationships are none of your concern. Evelyn stood, her patience exhausted. They became my concern the moment you showed up at my door asking for help. You spent my son's future on frivolous nonsense, and now you expect me to clean up the mess? It's not frivolous, Sophia shouted, jumping to her feet. You wouldn't understand. You've lived in this tiny house your whole life, wearing the same old clothes, driving the same old car. You don't know what it's like to have standards. The insult hit its mark, but Evelyn refused to show it. No, Sophia, I don't know what it's like to spend other people's money on luxuries while expecting them to provide me with housing when the money runs out. David turned from the window, his face flushed. Mom, please, I know Sophia made some mistakes. Some mistakes? Evelyn interrupted. David, she spent over $600,000 in a few months. This isn't some mistake. This is a pattern of behavior. You don't know anything about our marriage, Sophia hissed. You don't know what it's like to be married to someone who never wants to spend money on anything nice. I know what it's like to live within my means, Evelyn replied. I know what it's like to save for the things I want instead of expecting others to pay for them. Sophia's face twisted with rage. Well, aren't you just perfect, Evelyn? The perfect mother who raised the perfect son who married the wrong woman? I never said that. You didn't have to. It's written all over your face every time you look at me. The truth was, she was partially right. Evelyn had never liked Sophia from the moment David brought her home 3 years ago. But it wasn't because of her background or appearance. It was because of moments like this when her mask slipped and revealed the entitled, manipulative person underneath. Sophia, Evelyn said carefully, I don't dislike you because of who you are. I dislike the choices you make and how they affect my son. Your son is a grown man who makes his own choices, she shot back. Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you make all the choices. And he just goes along with them. David finally spoke up, his voice strained. Mom, that's not fair. Isn't it? Evelyn turned to him. Tell me, David, whose idea was it to sell the house? He hesitated. We discussed it together. Whose idea was it to invest $300,000 in a boutique? Another hesitation. Sophia thought it was a good opportunity. Whose idea was it to spend $80,000 paying off credit card debts that you didn't even know existed until after you were married? David's face paled. Mom, please, answer the question, David. Who's been making the financial decisions in your marriage? We make them together, he said weakly. Sophia laughed, a harsh sound echoing off the living room walls. Oh, please, David, tell your mother the truth. Tell her how you begged me to marry you. Tell her how grateful you were that someone like me would even look at someone like you. Evelyn felt her blood run cold. Someone like you. Yes, Sophia said, her voice dripping with venom. Someone beautiful, someone sophisticated, someone who could have had any man she wanted. Your son knows he hit the lottery when he married me. Evelyn looked at David, waiting for him to defend himself, to show some backbone. Instead, he stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped in defeat. And now, Sophia continued, when we need help, his own mother turns her back on us. What kind of mother does that? The kind who won't watch her son be destroyed by a manipulative woman, Evelyn said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. That's when Sophia crossed the line. "You bitter old woman!" she screamed. "You're just jealous because your son chose me over you. You can't stand that he loves me more than he loves his pathetic, lonely mother." "Sophia, stop," David said, but his voice lacked conviction. "No, I won't stop. She needs to hear this. You're a miserable old lady living in a rundown house, jealous of everyone who has more than you do. Well, guess what, Evelyn? Your son doesn't need you anymore. He has me." Something snapped inside Evelyn. All the years of biting her tongue, of trying to be diplomatic, of watching this woman slowly poison her relationship with her son, it all came crashing down. "Get out," she said quietly. "What?" "Get out of my house." Sophia laughed. "You can't throw us out. We have nowhere to go." "That's not my problem." "Mom," David pleaded, "please reconsider. We really have nowhere else." "You should have thought of that before you let your wife spend your entire future on jewelry and spa treatments." Sophia stepped closer, her face twisted with fury. "You don't get to talk to me like that in front of my husband." "This is my house," Evelyn said firmly. "I'll talk to you however I want, and right now I want you to leave." "We're not going anywhere," Sophia said, crossing her arms. "David, tell your mother we're staying." Evelyn looked at her son, this man she'd raised to stand up for what was right, to protect the people he loved. Instead, she saw a broken person who had let his wife walk all over him for so long that he didn't remember how to fight back. "David," Evelyn said softly, "please ask your wife to leave my home." He looked between them, his face anguished. "Mom, please just let us stay for a few days while we figure something out." "No!" That's when Sophia lost whatever remaining composure she had. "Fine!" she screamed. "You want to be a selfish, heartless? Then we'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of mother you are." She stormed toward the front door, yanking it open so hard it banged against the wall. Her neighbors, Mrs. Rodriguez from across the street and the Millers from next door, were outside. They looked up at the commotion. "You want to know what kind of woman Evelyn Reed really is?" Sophia shouted, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "She's throwing her own son out on the street, her own flesh and blood." Evelyn felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment as neighbors stopped to stare. "Sophia, please," David said, finally showing some backbone. But it was too late. "No!" she screamed. "Let them all know." This woman raised a son who worked his whole life to buy a beautiful home, and when life got a little difficult, when we needed help, she slammed the door in our faces. Mrs. Rodriguez took a step closer, trying to hear every word. "We asked for temporary help," Sophia continued, tears streaming down her face. Tears Evelyn was sure were calculated. "Just a place to stay while we got back on our feet. And this heartless woman said no to her own child." Evelyn stood in her doorway, more humiliated than she had been in years. Her quiet street, where she'd lived for 15 years and where her neighbors respected her, was now witness to this spectacle. "That's enough," Evelyn said, stepping onto her porch. "No, it's not enough," Sophia whirled around. "You think you're so much better than everyone else, but you're just a selfish old woman who can't stand to see other people happy." "Sophia, stop this right now." "Why? Because you're embarrassed? Good. You should be embarrassed." That's when Sophia did something that changed everything. In front of her neighbors, in front of God and everyone, Sophia Evans raised her hand and slapped Evelyn across the face. The sound echoed across the quiet street like a gunshot. Evelyn staggered back, her hand flying to her cheek more from shock than pain. For a moment, nobody moved. Even Sophia seemed surprised. Mrs. Rodriguez gasped. The Millers' teenage son, mowing their lawn, shut off the mower and stared. Evelyn looked at her son, waiting for him to offend her, to show outrage. Instead, David stood there, confused and overwhelmed. "Did you just hit me?" Evelyn asked quietly, her voice steady despite the rage building in her chest. Sophia lifted her chin defiantly. You deserved it. Throwing your own family out on the street like common trash. Evelyn looked around at her neighbors, all witnessing this humiliation. Mrs. Rodriguez looked horrified. The Millers were whispering. Even the mail carrier had stopped his truck to watch. David, Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper, your wife just assaulted me in front of the entire neighborhood. He opened his mouth, then closed it. And you're going to stand there and let her? Mom, she's upset. She didn't mean to slap me in the face. Sophia stepped between them. Don't try to make this about you being a victim, Evelyn. You brought this on yourself. Evelyn stared at this woman who had humiliated her, convinced her son to throw away his financial future, and was now trying to make Evelyn the villain. Evelyn, the villain. Get off my property, Evelyn said quietly. Make me, Sophia sneered. Evelyn looked at her son one last time, hoping for some sign that he would stand up to her, choose right over wrong. Instead, she saw a man so thoroughly manipulated he couldn't even defend his own mother from physical assault. You have 5 minutes to get your bags and get off my property, Evelyn said. If you're not gone by then, I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare, Sophia said, but uncertainty crept into her eyes. Evelyn pulled her cell phone and dialed 911. As the phone rang, she watched Sophia's face shift from defiance to panic. She grabbed David's arm. Tell your mother to hang up that phone right now, she hissed. But Evelyn was already talking to the dispatcher, giving her address, explaining she needed an officer to remove trespassers who had become violent. When she hung up, Sophia stared in disbelief. You actually called the police on your own son? No, Evelyn said calmly. I called the police on the woman who just assaulted me in front of witnesses. For the first time, Sophia Evans looked genuinely afraid. The police arrived within 10 minutes. Officer Miller, a young woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor, immediately put Evelyn at ease. Officer Jenkins, her partner, was older, with graying temples and the weary look of someone who'd seen too much family drama. By the time they arrived, Sophia had composed herself somewhat. Her tears stopped, hair fixed, but panic still lurked. David stood beside his luggage, looking like a lost child. Ma'am, Officer Miller said, approaching Evelyn first. We received a call about an assault. Yes, Evelyn said, pointing to her still stinging cheek. This woman slapped me. Officer Jenkins looked at Sophia. Is this true, ma'am? She was being unreasonable, Sophia said, as if that justified physical violence. We just needed a place to stay, and she threw us out like strangers. That doesn't give you the right to hit anyone, Officer Miller said firmly. Ma'am, she turned back to Evelyn. Do you want to press charges? Evelyn looked at her son, standing with his head down, silent. This man she had raised, sacrificed for, loved unconditionally, couldn't even condemn his wife for hitting his mother. Yes, Evelyn said quietly. I want to press charges. Sophia's face went white. You can't be serious. Assault is a serious charge, ma'am, Officer Jenkins said. We have multiple witnesses who saw you strike Mrs. Reed. Indeed, her neighbors were still watching. Mrs. Rodriguez nodded vigorously. I saw the whole thing, she called out. She hit Evelyn right across the face, unprovoked. This is ridiculous, Sophia protested. She's my mother-in-law. This is a family dispute. Family or not, Officer Miller said, assault is assault. You'll need to come with us. As they led Sophia to the patrol car, she turned back to David. Don't just stand there. Do something. But David seemed frozen, watching his wife arrested on his mother's lawn. He looked at Evelyn with something that might have been accusation. Mom, did you really have to? Yes, Evelyn said before he could finish. I really had to. Your wife assaulted me in front of the entire neighborhood, and you stood there and did nothing. She's your wife and I'm your mother, but apparently that doesn't mean anything anymore. Officer Jenkins approached with a clipboard. Mrs. Reed, we'll need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. Can you do that this afternoon? Of course. As the police car pulled away with Sophia, David slowly loaded his luggage back into his SUV. "Where will you go?" Evelyn asked, despite everything. He shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe a hotel for tonight." "With what money?" The question hung in the air. Both knew he couldn't afford a hotel indefinitely. Both knew this was just the beginning of his problems. "David," Evelyn said softly, "this doesn't have to be the end. If you leave her, if you admit this whole situation is wrong, we can work through this." He looked at her with tired eyes. "She's my wife, Mom. I can't just abandon her." "She abandoned you the moment she spent your future on jewelry and spa trips." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is. It's exactly that simple." He climbed into his SUV without another word and drove away, leaving Evelyn standing on her front porch, feeling more alone than she had since her husband died. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Evelyn gave her statement at the police station, detailing not just the assault but the entire confrontation. The officer taking her statement, Detective Rodriguez, was thorough. "Mrs. Reed," she said, "is this the first time your daughter-in-law has been physically aggressive?" Evelyn considered. "Yes, physically, but she's been emotionally manipulative for years." "Can you elaborate?" Evelyn told her about the gradual isolation from David, how Sophia always scheduled visits when Evelyn couldn't make it, how she'd convinced David to skip family gatherings and holidays. She explained how Sophia had slowly turned her son against her, making him believe Evelyn was overly critical and interfering. "And the financial situation?" Detective Rodriguez asked. "You mentioned they sold their house and spent over $600,000? "Gone in months," Evelyn confirmed. Detective Rodriguez whistled. "That's a lot of money to go through that quickly." "She has expensive tastes and no concept of living within her means." "And your son went along with this?" Evelyn sighed. "My son has been completely manipulated by this woman. He can't see what she's doing to him, to his future, to our family." That evening, alone in her house, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table with tea, truly thinking about her situation. Pressing charges against Sophia was just the beginning. Sophia would be back. They both would. And next time, they might not be so direct. Evelyn thought about the house on Elm Street, the one she'd helped them buy. $40,000 from her retirement savings, money she'd worked decades to accumulate, now flushed away. But then she remembered something. When they'd bought the house, there had been paperwork, lots of it. And because she'd contributed such a significant portion of the down payment, the real estate attorney had insisted on certain protections. Evelyn went to her file cabinet and pulled out the folder labeled David's House Purchase. Inside were copies of all the documents, including something she'd nearly forgotten, a promissory note. The attorney had insisted on it when she'd given them the $40,000. "Mrs. Reed," he'd said, "I strongly recommend this be structured as a loan rather than a gift. It protects your interests and ensures your son understands the gravity of accepting such a large sum." At the time, Evelyn had protested. She just wanted to help her son. But David himself had insisted. "Mom, I want to pay you back. This should be official." The promissory note was clear. $40,000 to be repaid at 5% annual interest, with payments beginning 1 year after the purchase. The loan was secured by the property itself, meaning Evelyn had a legal interest in the house, but they'd sold the house without paying her back, without even mentioning the outstanding loan. Evelyn picked up her phone and dialed the number for Arthur Jenkins, the attorney who'd handled the original purchase. His secretary told her he could see her the next morning. That night, Evelyn barely slept. She kept thinking about David as a little boy, crawling into her bed during thunderstorms, how proud he'd been graduating college, how he'd cried at his father's funeral and promised to always take care of her. Where had that boy gone? How had he become this man who stood silent while his wife assaulted his mother? The next morning, Evelyn dressed carefully in her best suit and drove to Arthur Jenkins' office in Cedar Rapids. He was a distinguished man in his 60s with silver hair and a commanding presence. "Mrs. Reed," he said, shaking her hand warmly, "I was sorry to hear about your troubles. Please sit down and tell me what's happened." Evelyn explained everything. the house sale, the squandered money, the assault, the arrest. Arthur listened without interruption, making notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Evelyn," he said, "do you understand that you have significant legal recourse here?" "What do you mean?" "The promissory note securin'. Your $40,000 loan was recorded as a lien against the property. When your son sold the house without satisfying that debt, he violated the terms. You have grounds for both breach of contract and conversion." Evelyn felt a flutter in her chest, not quite hope, but stronger than resignation. "What does that mean in practical terms?" "It means you can sue for the full amount of the loan, plus interest, plus damages. And because the debt was secured by real property, you may be able to attach other assets to satisfy the judgment." "What other assets?" Arthur smiled grimly. "Well, let's see what your son and daughter-in-law have left after their spending spree." Over the next hour, Arthur explained her options. She could file a civil lawsuit seeking repayment, interest, and damages. She could also pursue criminal charges for theft by conversion. "But Arthur," Evelyn said, "I don't want to destroy my son's life. I just want him to understand that actions have consequences." "Sometimes, Evelyn," Arthur said, "the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is to stop protecting them from the consequences of their choices." Evelyn thought about that as she drove home. Was she protecting David by allowing Sophia to manipulate him? Was she enabling his poor decisions by always catching him when he fell? By the time she got home, Evelyn had made her decision. She called Arthur Jenkins and told him to file the lawsuit, not just against Sophia, but against both of them. They were married, they'd made the decision together, and they would face the consequences together. Then Evelyn did something else. She called a locksmith and had all her locks changed. She installed a security system with cameras. She wasn't going to be caught off guard again. That afternoon, David called. "Mom, Sophia made bail. We need to talk." "No, we don't." "Mom, please. She's sorry about hitting you. She was just upset." "David, your wife stole $40,000 from me and assaulted me when I refused to house you both after you squandered over $500,000. There's nothing to talk about." "What do you mean, stole $40,000? Evelyn explained the promissory note, the lien, the lawsuit she'd filed. The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up. "Mom," he finally said, his voice shaking. "You can't sue us. We're family." "You're right, David. We are family. Which is why what you did hurt so much worse than if a stranger had stolen from me." "We didn't steal from you. David, you sold a house that had a 40,000 lien on it without paying me back. What would you call that?" Another long silence. "How much are you suing for?" 40,000 lien on it without paying me back. What would you call that?" Another long silence. "How much are you suing for?" 40,000 plus 3 years of interest, plus legal fees, plus damages for conversion and breach of contract. My attorney estimates the total at around $60,000. "We don't have $60,000. You should have thought of that before you let your wife spend your entire future on jewelry and spa treatments." "Mom, please, can't we work something out? Maybe we can pay you back slowly." "You mean like the original promissory note said? The one you ignored for 3 years before selling the house?" She could hear him breathing heavily. "Where are you staying?" she asked. "A motel, the cheapest one we could find." "How long can you afford to stay there?" "Maybe a week, 2 weeks if we're careful." "And then what?" "I don't know, Mom. I really don't know." For a moment, Evelyn almost weakened. This was her son, her baby. He sounded so lost and scared. But then she remembered Sophia's hand striking her face, and her resolve strengthened. "David, I love you. I always have, and I always will. But I will not be manipulated, stolen from, or assaulted. If you want a relationship with me, you need to take responsibility for your choices and the consequences that come with them." "What does that mean?" It means you need to decide what's more important to you, your relationship with your wife or your relationship with your mother. Because right now, you can't have both. Evelyn hung up before he could respond, her hands shaking. Outside, the sun was setting over her quiet neighborhood. Mrs. Rodriguez was watering her flowers, and the Miller boy was riding his bicycle. Everything looked normal, peaceful. But Evelyn knew nothing would ever be normal again. Tomorrow, David and Sophia would receive the legal papers. They would realize their actions had real consequences, and Evelyn would find out once and for all whether the son she'd raised still existed somewhere inside the man Sophia had created. 3 days after Evelyn filed the lawsuit, Arthur Jenkins called her with news that made her blood run cold. "Evelyn, I need you to sit down." She was already sitting, but gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of things?" "Sophia has a pattern of this behavior. Before she married your son, she was engaged to 2 other men. Both relationships ended when the men discovered she'd been using their credit cards without permission. In one case, she ran up over $50,000 in debt." Evelyn's heart sank. "Does David know this?" "I don't think so. She's very good at covering her tracks. But there's more. The boutique she invested in? It doesn't exist. My investigator couldn't find any business license, storefront, any evidence that this boutique is anything more than a way for her friend to get $300,000 for free." Evelyn felt sick. "So the money is just gone?" "It appears so. And Evelyn, there's something else. Something worse." She braced herself. "She's been having an affair for at least 6 months, possibly longer. The man is married, wealthy, and she's been using your son's money to fund their relationship. The expensive jewelry, the spa trips, the car detailing, it was all part of maintaining her relationship with this other man." The room spun. Evelyn gripped the table to steady herself. Her son, her decent, hard-working son, had been completely destroyed by a woman who was using him as an ATM while cheating on him. "Does my son know about the affair?" "I don't believe so. But Evelyn, the man she's been seeing, he's ending the relationship. My investigator spoke to his wife, who found out and gave him an ultimatum. That's why Sophia is suddenly desperate for money and a place to stay. Her sugar daddy cut her off." Evelyn closed her eyes, processing. Everything made sense now. The sudden urgency to sell the house, the reckless spending, the desperation when Evelyn refused to let them stay. Sophia wasn't just irresponsible. She was a predator who had systematically destroyed David's life to fund her affair. "What do we do with this information?" Evelyn asked. "We use it. In the lawsuit, we can argue the money was obtained through fraud and deception. We can also use it to ensure your son understands exactly who he married." Who he married. That afternoon, the process server delivered the legal papers to the motel where David and Sophia were staying. Evelyn knew because David called 30 minutes later, his voice shaking with rage. "Mom, what the hell is this?" "It's a lawsuit, David. I told you I was going to file it." $67,000? You're suing us for $67,000? "That's what you owe me, plus interest, legal fees, damages." "We don't have $67,000. "I know. That's what happens when you steal from family to fund a lifestyle you can't afford." "We didn't steal from you." "David, you sold a house that had a $40,000 lien on it without paying me back. In legal terms, that's conversion of secured property." Evelyn could hear Sophia screaming in the background. "She wants to know if you've lost your mind," David said. "Tell your wife that I'm completely sane. I'm also completely done being stolen from and assaulted." "Mom, please, can't we work something out?" "No, David. The time for our working things out was 3 years ago when you first missed a payment. Can't we work something out?" "No, David. The time for working things out was 3 years ago when you first missed a payment, or 6 months ago when you decided to sell the house. Or last week when you showed up at my door asking for help after squandering over $500,000. The time for working things out has passed. What do you want us to do? We're living in a motel. I want you to get jobs and start taking responsibility, starting with the truth," Evelyn said. her voice steady now. Not hard, just finally done with pretending there wasn't a cost to all of this. Tell the court where the money went. Tell yourself who you've become. There was a long breath on the line, then muffled arguing, Sophia's sharp whisper cutting through drywall and distance. David came back smaller, or maybe just honest. If I leave her, will you drop the charges? He asked. No, Evelyn said. Assault is between her and the law. The loan is between you and me. Leaving her won't erase either, but it might save whatever is left of you. Outside, a finch landed on the porch rail, light as a note at the end of a hymn. Find a place month to month. Call human resources. Sell the watch you kept. Keep receipts. Start over. She didn't lie about everything, he tried, the reflex still there, the old muscle memory of defending the person who broke him. Evelyn let the silence answer. People say the truth sets you free. They forget it first breaks your favorite illusions. When he spoke again, he sounded like the boy who used to crawl into her bed during storms. The boutique doesn't exist, he said. The man does. The words collapsed between them. Somewhere, a kettle clicked off. I didn't know how to admit I knew. You just did, Evelyn said. Now put it in writing. Give it to your attorney. Cooperate with the investigator. If you want mercy, offer the truth. She exhaled. And, Yid, do not bring her back to my door. He cried then, quietly, like someone who had run out of defenses and finally found the ground. Will you ever forgive me? Forgiveness is a garden, she said. It grows where someone pulls the weeds. Start pulling. She ended the call and stood in her small kitchen, the house she had paid off in clean, patient years. The new deadbolt slid into place with a sound that felt like a prayer answered. 3 weeks later, the arraignment set its tidy gears into motion. Sophia arrived without the jewelry. The shine didn't suit court lighting. The neighbors' statements were neat, the officer's report unambiguous. The investigator's affidavit laid out credit lines like breadcrumbs leading to a cliff. When the clerk called names, David stood on the other side of the aisle, hands folded, eyes clear. He didn't look at Evelyn. He didn't need to. Some distances are respectful, some are earned. In the hallway, after signatures and dates, he approached. I found a room, he said. I start at the warehouse Monday. I set up a payment plan. It's not much at first. He handed her a cashier's check, the first square brick in a small, honest wall. Evelyn nodded. Bring every receipt to Arthur. We'll adjust as you grow. Consequences aren't a sentence, they're a syllabus. The corner of his mouth lifted, half a smile, half a wince. Growth aches. She remembered her father saying that when the hydrangeas took to new soil. On Sunday, she weeded the petunias. The bruise had faded to a pale yellow, the color of endings that did not kill you. Mrs. Rodriguez waved from her stoop, then left a bag of lemons on the porch without ringing the bell. Small mercies, properly timed, are a kind of justice. The lawsuit would take months. Gardens do too. Interest would accrue, so would backbone. Some afternoons the house felt too quiet. Most mornings it felt exactly right. She brewed tea, signed one more document, and set the check in a folder labeled Paid. First installment. Then she opened the window and let October in, cool and clean. There are worse things than learning to love someone at a distance. There are better things than mistaking rescue for love. By evening, the porch light clicked on, steady and ordinary. Evelyn locked the door, not against the world, but for the life inside it. And when the phone finally rang, unknown number, courthouse exchange, she smiled, ready to answer. Some storms you weather, some storms you name and file. Either way, tomorrow needs tending. That, too, was always her work.